What is up, Sopranos fans? Kino here. I'm back with another Soprano log, and today we're looking at the 11th episode of the third season, Pine Barrens. Now, this episode pretty much entirely revolves around Tony's relationship with Gloria and Meadows' relationship with Jackie Jr. Anyway, that is the episode. Thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next Soprano log, coming soon. Nah, I'm just kidding. You guys know what this episode is. The most infamous episode of the entire series, except for maybe the finale. It's either considered to be one of the best or one of the worst episodes, depending on who you ask. And I think a lot of it has to do with how popular the episode is. It's become so popular that some fans basically think it's overrated. But I'll let you guys judge for that. Let's get into the episode. This is Pine Barrens. Now, Gloria returns from Morocco and she goes to see Tony on his boat. While he's gone, she answers the phone and it's Irina calling. You know, she's drunk and calling him again. Tony lies about it and that really pisses Gloria off. She doesn't like the fact that, you know, he lied to her, as well as it's kind of the fact he's seeing another woman, or he was seeing another woman too. That really sends her over the edge. So she gets pissed at him and throws his gift into the ocean and storms off. And again, we're seeing a different side to her than Tony is used to. Meanwhile, Tony sends Paulie to go collect Silvio's money from this guy, Valeri. We saw him last episode. He works for Slava, Tony's Russian associate. Paulie and Christopher go to his place, and Paulie is just incredibly rude to this guy, talking down to him. He ends up smashing the dude's universal remote, and this leads to a physical altercation. Again, it's entirely Paulie's fault. He starts it, he throws the first punch, and they end up having to, choke him with a lamp, and they think they killed him. So they put him in the trunk and decide to drive him out to the Pine Barrens, where nobody will find this guy. Paulie and Christopher arrive in the woods. Their plan is to, use a shovel and dig a grave for him, but when they open the trunk, they see that this guy is still alive. So they end up taking him out into the woods, into the snow, and forcing him to dig his own grave at gunpoint. But these guys, in typical fashion, mess it up. He manages to hit Christopher with the shovel and manages to run away. They start chasing him through the snow and shooting at him. And it looks like Paulie's manages to hit him in the head. We see blood spurt off, but they aren't able to find the body. It just disappears. And meanwhile, the fact that they've run around makes them lost. So now they're somewhere in the Jersey Pine Barrens with no idea how to get back. Tony goes to see Slava. He's really worried because, he doesn't know what Slava knows. He doesn't know what the situation is. So he's worried he could be walking into a trap. But Slava doesn't know anything, but he is worried about his friend. He's, addicted to drugs, and this guy saved his life in Chechnya. Slava reveals that he was an ex-Russian commando. And this really worries Tony that, he might survive. So he calls Paulie and tells him 100% this guy cannot come back. And of course, we get, one of the most infamous, if not the most infamous lines from the series.
You're not going to believe this. He killed 16 Czechoslovakians. Guy was an interior decorator.
His house looked like shit.
And yeah, that's really why this episode is so popular. It's just incredibly funny, the dialogue in here, the lines they come up with, and the premise of, Paulie and Christopher lost in the woods. It's definitely more of a standalone episode, but the humor and the characters just completely pop in this episode. But one interesting detail that I noticed is that Slava is drinking Grey Goose, which seems weird to me as, this old school Russian guy, that he'd be drinking French vodka. I read some explanations that maybe, he was trying to be more Western and drinking a more Western vodka, or it might be the fact that The Sopranos had some kind of deal with Grey Goose. We see it a couple of times in the series that people drink it. But I just noticed that detail and I thought it was a little bit out of character for an old school Russian guy to be doing that. Meanwhile, Meadow and Jackie Jr. are continuing to date, but Meadow is starting to notice that Jackie Jr. is really stupid. They're playing a game of Scrabble, and he picks the dumbest words ever to try to score points. But when he doesn't show up one night to her dorm, she gets suspicious, and she borrows a friend's car to go investigate. She finds him and finds that he was sleeping with a hooker. So she's obviously heartbroken by this. She breaks up with him. And Jackie Jr. just, fucked up his relationship. Again, trying to be this player, trying to be this guy who, sleeps with a lot of women like the gangsters do. But it blew up in his face this time, and he lost out on pretty much the best girl he could ever hope to be with. Meanwhile, Paulie and Chris are stranded in the woods for the night. It's freezing and cold, and they manage to find shelter in this old broken down van in the middle of the woods. They're forced to eat ketchup packets and relish from this old bag from God knows when, but they're starving, and this is something for them to eat. And we're seeing some conflict brew between the two. Paulie's trying to blame the whole thing on Christopher when it's entirely his fault, and they're obviously tired and exhausted, and it almost erupts into a physical confrontation between the two. Meanwhile, Gloria and Tony make up. They decide to have dinner together at her house. He arrives really late because of a family emergency. And then after they have sex, he gets called by Paulie, who tells him to come and get them. So he tells her he has to leave, and she just completely freaks out about this. She ends up throwing a steak at him. And again, we're seeing more of that craziness that's the other side of her character. Tony and Bobby drive out to the woods. They manage to find Christopher and Paulie the next morning. But when they get back to the spot where Paulie's car was, the car is stolen with all the money that was inside of it. Now, they don't know who stole it. It might be some kids. It could be the Russian guy if he managed to survive. So we're left to wonder, what really happened. But regardless of the situation, Tony's just incredibly disappointed with Paulie. He fucked up. Even all of Paulie's excuses, Tony can tell that he's being bullshitted. Paulie put him in a situation that could be bad for him, especially because of his relationship with Slava. So we're going to see that relationship go downhill between him and Paulie moving forward. In the end, though, they decide, the guy's probably dead, so they decide to just go home. And yeah, that's where the episode ends. Now, the one question that gets asked more than anything is, what happened to the Russian guy? Now, there's some theories. Some people think that, he climbed up into a tree, and that's why they weren't able to find him. There's been some interviews where some of the writers have talked about it. There was originally going to be a scene where we see him later on, the Russian guy, and he would have brain damage from being shot in the head, so he doesn't remember, what happened. Chase has said in a couple interviews that in the back of his mind, the guy was found by some Boy Scouts, and they managed to get him back to his boss, who sent him back to Russia. But the point is that it doesn't really matter what happened to the Russian. Sopranos is not a show that's about answering every single plot point. It's more just about the characters and the experience of the show. So in the end, these plot details are not really important to the creators. And it doesn't really matter where the Russian ended up. But like I said, this is definitely probably the most famous episode of the show, except for maybe the finale. So I hope you guys enjoyed this recap, and stay tuned for the next Soprano log, coming soon. Thanks.